The movie commences by introducing three troublemakers from the school, led by a student named Miles. These three troublemakers attend school solely to bully those they perceive as weak. One of their regular targets is a chubby young man named Jimmy Mulligan. Despite enduring Miles' bullying, Jimmy never retaliates. At school, Jimmy has two loyal friends, Andy and Bobby, who always stand by his side. Moreover, he is blessed with caring and affectionate parents. One day, while Jimmy and his friends are en route to school, they unexpectedly encounter Miles and his gang. Miles and his buddies demand $100 from Jimmy. This amount of money is clearly beyond Jimmy's means, coming from a humble background. Even though Jimmy explains that he doesn't possess such a sum, Miles disregards his words and continues to coerce Jimmy into giving him $100. In addition to targeting Jimmy, Miles frequently bullies Bobby, who expresses himself in a more feminine manner. After Miles humiliates Bobby in front of the entire class, Jimmy attempts to console and reassure his friend. Jimmy then invites Andy and Bobby to have lunch together in the cafeteria, promising to treat them. Andy and Bobby are taken aback when they see Jimmy devouring a substantial amount of food. Nonetheless, they never mock him for his hearty appetite. Following this, Andy and Bobby endeavor to set Jimmy up with a girl named Adrian from their school. They often catch her stealing glances at Jimmy when they eat together in the cafeteria. Shortly thereafter, Miles reappears and sits beside Jimmy, demanding payment for the $100 he had asked for. One of the students, disturbed by Miles' presence, speaks up and asks him to refrain from causing a disturbance and leave the cafeteria. Receiving a rebuke from a student he deems weak, Miles reacts by shouting and berating the student with harsh words. However, another student, who is physically larger and stronger than Miles, decides to teach him a lesson for creating a commotion while everyone is enjoying their lunch. In an instant, Miles' bravado wanes, and he hastily retreats from the cafeteria. Once school ended, Miles once again confronted Jimmy, demanding that he hand over a $100 bill. However, Jimmy firmly asserted that he didn't possess that much money, and that he didn't owe anything to Miles. Therefore, he felt no obligation to give him the cash. Upon hearing Jimmy's words of resistance, Miles didn't hesitate to assault him on the side of the road. Just as Miles was about to finish beating Jimmy, an elderly man arrived and threatened to report Miles to the police. Startled, Miles quickly fled the scene. The old man, who introduced himself as Mr. Actions, came to Jimmy's aid and took him to his house to tend to his injuries. While at Mr. Actions' house, Jimmy discovered that he used to be a world heavyweight boxer. Filled with determination, Jimmy pleaded with Mr. Action to train him in boxing so he could stand up against Miles and put an end to the bullying. Although Mr. Action was willing to assist Jimmy in defeating Miles, he admitted he was too old to personally coach him. However, he promised to seek help from his friends to train Jimmy. Afterward, Mr. Action accompanied Jimmy back home and informed his parents about the incident. Jimmy's parents were immensely grateful for Mr. Action's care and hospitality towards their son. They immediately granted Jimmy permission to pursue boxing training under Mr. Action's guidance. They even accompanied Jimmy to Manny's boxing training facility. Mr. Action then briefed Manny about Jimmy's situation. Impressed by Jimmy's determination, Manny agreed to help him on the condition that he displayed seriousness and never gave up, as boxing training is rigorous. Embracing the opportunity, Jimmy commenced regular boxing practice with Manny, while Mr. Action closely monitored his progress during each training session. During one of their conversations, Jimmy confided in Mr. Action about Miles' persistent demands for $100. In response, Mr. Action proposed a plan. Jimmy should double Miles' request to $200, but with a stipulation: he must give himself 1 month to prepare. Mr. Action believed that Jimmy could develop the skills necessary to defeat Miles by the designated time, thereby avoiding the need to hand over the $200. On the following day, Jimmy followed Mr. Action's advice when Miles returned to collect the money. Miles appeared to ponder for a moment since the time period was quite lengthy. However, he eventually agreed to give Jimmy a month to come up with the doubled amount of money. Temporarily relieved, Jimmy no longer had to endure Miles pestering him about the cash. However, during his afternoon boxing training session with Manny, he seemed lethargic and lacking inspiration. Jimmy claimed to feel exhausted, but he couldn't deceive Manny's keen observations. Manny, being a professional, knew that Jimmy's fatigue stemmed from a mental rather than physical source. Manny then informed Mr. Action about Jimmy's state of mind, expressing concern that he wasn't displaying seriousness during training. On their way home, Mr. Action inquired why Jimmy seemed dispirited that day. In response, Jimmy admitted feeling tired and frustrated, believing that all his training efforts were proving fruitless. He still felt weak and incapable of standing up for himself when faced with Miles' bullying. Hearing Jimmy's discouragement, Mr. Action attempted to uplift his spirits by affirming that no effort is ever wasted. Regardless of the outcome, he assured Jimmy that he would gain valuable lessons from his endeavors. Upon arriving home, Jimmy's father also noticed his waning enthusiasm for training. His father didn't compel him to continue, leaving the decision entirely up to Jimmy. However, he expressed his hope that one day Jimmy would be able to teach his own children how to defend themselves, sparing them from experiencing the same fate. Reflecting on his father's words, Jimmy's fighting spirit reignited, and he became determined to resume training with utmost seriousness. The next day, Miles and his group once again intimidated Jimmy and his friends. They even went so far as to physically assault Bobby in front of a crowd. Jimmy approached Bobby, who was crying in solitude, and attempted to console him. However, Bobby despaired, believing they were powerless against Miles and his gang. Jimmy disagreed and informed Bobby that he had a plan to defeat Miles and put an end to their bullying. Upon reaching home, Jimmy raced to Manny's boxing gym on his bicycle, even though he typically relied on Mr. Action for transportation, since the gym was quite a distance away. Mr. Action was thrilled to see Jimmy's enthusiasm for joining boxing training once again. However, in his excitement, Jimmy accidentally collided with Manny and fell to the ground. Instead of becoming angry, Manny was delighted to witness Jimmy's renewed dedication to boxing. In short, day after day, Jimmy trained in boxing with unwavering determination and a fiery passion. Manny intensified Jimmy's training regime with more rigorous physical exercises and incorporated elements of mixed martial arts. On the other hand, Mr. Action nurtured Jimmy's mindset by offering advice and inspiration to fuel his fighting spirit. Meanwhile, at school, Jimmy confided in Andy about his boxing training and his mission to defeat Miles. At that moment, Adrian approached Jimmy, and the two agreed to go on a date. Adrian and Jimmy attended a party at a friend's house. During an intimate conversation, they discovered a strong connection and compatibility, as they found themselves engrossed in discussions about various topics. They decided to pursue a romantic relationship. While enjoying their date, Eddie, one of Miles' cronies, began to provoke and insult Jimmy and Adrian. However, now brimming with confidence, Jimmy attempted to stand up to Eddie and promptly ejected him from the situation. Time passed, and the moment arrived for Jimmy to fulfill his promise to Miles. However, Jimmy was determined not to allow Miles to blackmail or bully him any longer. That morning, he awoke with a surge of confidence and an unwavering resolve. Upon arriving at school, Miles immediately approached him and threatened to harm his friends if he dared to break his promise or try to escape. While in the restroom, Jimmy encounters a young man named Vinny who learns about his ongoing feud with Miles. Vinny, who is aware that Jimmy has been training in boxing at Manny's gym, offers words of encouragement and wishes him good luck. Unbeknownst to Jimmy and Vinny, Eddie, who happened to be in a nearby toilet cubicle, overhears their conversation and promptly reports it to Miles. Following Miles' instructions, Eddie contacts a notorious troublemaker named Glassjaw Bülly and arranges for him to come to school and challenge Jimmy. The conflict between Jimmy and Miles starts to spread throughout the school, capturing the attention of everyone eager to witness who will emerge victorious. Confidently, Jimmy approaches Miles and his gang. Miles, already aware that Jimmy won't give in to his demands for money, devises a plan to defeat him with the assistance of Glassjaw. However, Vinny acts swiftly by dispatching his associates to kidnap Glassjaw, forcing Miles to face Jimmy on his own. The fight commences. Initially, Jimmy struggles to contend with Miles' attacks. Nonetheless, he refuses to surrender and fights back against Miles. Jimmy manages to dodge Miles' strikes and lands a powerful blow to his face. No longer a weak, overweight boy subjected to bullying, Jimmy transforms into someone who can defend himself and is determined to grow stronger in order to protect the vulnerable from oppression. Witnessing Miles becoming increasingly cornered, his friends attempt to join the fight against Jimmy. However, Andy and Bobby refuse to remain silent. They join forces with Jimmy, standing up against the bullies until they ultimately defeat Miles and his gang. Having emerged victorious from the feud, Jimmy confronts Miles, urging him to cease his bullying behavior towards everyone at school. However, Miles appears indifferent to Jimmy's plea. On the other hand, Mr. Action, who had witnessed the showdown between Jimmy and Miles from the sidelines, feels an overwhelming sense of pride for his protege. Despite Jimmy's newfound strength, Mr. Action recognizes that he still possesses a compassionate heart. Unbeknownst to Jimmy, the incident between him and Miles goes viral after it is uploaded to various social media platforms by onlookers who recorded the altercation. The footage gains so much attention that it even catches the interest of a local television channel, leading Jimmy's actions against his bullies to become a topic of conversation within the community. People applaud Jimmy's courage for standing up against his tormentors. His parents, too, experience a profound sense of pride, knowing that their son can now assert himself and is no longer subject to bullying. The film concludes by showcasing Jimmy, Andy, Bobby, and Adrian, who have grown more self-assured and have become the center of attention at school following their successful endeavor to topple the group of bullies that had plagued the students. The moral of the story is don't underestimate the power of someone who's been underestimated. Even a jokester can surprise everyone and show that they're stronger than they appear. Bullies beware, because even a funny person can pack a punch.